I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing my series ranking every Elden Ring boss via their regions, as we arrive at Altus Plateau. Interested in the rest of the series? Check the description for links. The definition of which bosses belong to Altus Plateau versus Mount Gelmir is complicated, as the area's map fragment doesn't even include the shaded castle, the Windham Ruins, or the entire lower portion of the map you can explore if you go the alternate route to Altus. But I used common sense here. If an area is blatantly in Altus's colour scheme, despite being on Mount Gelmir's map fragment, I'm considering it a part of Altus. However, any bosses that reside in Leyndell's map fragment will be in a separate video, with the cutoff point being the outer wall guarded by the dual tree sentinels. So let's get started, all 20 Elden Ring Altus Plateau bosses ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 20, we have Wormface, found at the Minor Erdtree in the Valley Forest. There are very few Elden Ring bosses that I straight up despise with all my being, because I like to see the design philosophy behind each boss and think, oh, I understand why this boss was designed this way, but there is nothing remotely fun about Wormface. Well, beyond his initial surprise, as you're expecting an Erdtree avatar, instead getting faced with this blighted beast, but even then the Mount Gelmir Minor Erdtree does it better with the ulcerated tree spirit. The Wormface is infamous for one simple reason. Its attacks all utilize the Deathblight status effect. What this means is that regardless of how much health you knock off Wormface per run, it only takes one bad roll to have Deathblight trigger, ending you immediately. Deathblight instantly kills the player upon fully building up, and at this point in the game, you likely don't have the best gear to optimize your Deathblight defense. Though this guy only killed me twice in this playthrough, to be fair, but I will never forget watching my partner try and fail to defeat Wormface for over an hour, because on top of the Deathblight, there are also minor enemies nearby that can join the fight if you're not careful. I love its aesthetic, the creature design is on point, and I'll even give props that because of their instant kill mechanics, the tension as you fight this boss is memorable to the player. It's just not for me. He drops the Crimson Spill Crystal tier and the Speckled Hard tier upon defeat. The former boosts your max HP by 10% for 3 minutes, not bad for people who just want more and more HP, though you'd get more bang for your buck with Radahn's Great Rune instead. The latter tier boosts resistances for 90 minutes for 3 minutes, and cures any status buildup. Gee, that would have been useful for fighting a Deathblight boss. At number 19, we have the Stone Digger Troll, found in the old Altus Tunnel. It's a shame that for the various tunnels and ruins you find throughout Altus, most of the bosses end up being beefier repeats of fights we've already taken on. Case in point, the Stone Digger Troll is back after having been absent since Limgrave, and you know what? He's even easier now than he was back then. At least in the early game, I didn't have a solid build to work with, and my resources were pretty finite. Here in Altus, I've already got a main weapon type I've committed to, I've got tons of healing resources, more talismans to give my build that extra oomph, and most importantly, because the Stone Digger Troll relies on its high hardness stat for defense, I'm forced to two-hand! Because if you use a one-handed attack on this boss, the attack will bounce off of his skin. And I do a lot of damage when I two-hand my Twin Blade. He drops the Great Club upon defeat, which is, well, it's the strengthiest of strength weapons I've ever seen. If you use this, you like to unga bunga, and I can't blame you for it. But also, it is the white bread of strength weapons. There's so much more out there for you in Elden Ring, please don't use the big club. At number 18, we have the Crystallian Duo, found in the Altus Tunnel. Another case of a repeated boss that doesn't get a meaningful enough improvement. They go from a whopping 1,595 HP to 1,892 HP, what a jump, said no one. With my flail, the Crystallian Duo had no chance against me. And you can see it from the footage. They barely do any damage, so I can actually tank the hits and heal through them whenever I want. And they have the Crystallian shortcoming, where if one of them is attacking, the other one takes 3 to 5 business days to join in the fight. The only reason this boss ranks above the Stone Digger Troll, despite that fight arguably being a tad harder, is the drop. This pair gives you the Somber Stone Miner's Bell-Bearing 2, allowing the purchase of Somber Smithing Stones of levels 3 and 4. Somber Smithing Stones will always be useful in Elden Ring, as they upgrade the cool fancy weapons. Crystallian Duo, your designs are still awesome, but thank God you had a drop that was universally useful. At number 17, we have Demi-Human Queen Gillica, found in the Lux Ruins. Oh, this is a real shame that I did the Mount Gelmir video before this one, because I already ranked the other 2 Demi-Human Queens in the game, and they're both much stronger than Gillica. She has a staff which she can slam into the ground to try and squash you. She has a series of bites that you can block or dodge through, and a roar attack. But if you're remotely aggressive, none of this will matter. Just look how easily she fell to me. She got 1 hit, and even then, I'd call it a lucky strike, all things considered. She guards the Ritual Sword Talisman, which raises attack power by 10% when HP is at maximum, so if you're going for a no damage run, this is basically a god tier talisman. I can see the use, even if I know I'd never be in a position to get a lot of use from it myself, since I tend to trade and tank damage in my fights. Just like Margot on Mount Gelmir, I will happily go back to forgetting Gillica's existence right now. At number 16, we have the Sanguine Noble, found in the Wraithblood Ruins. Just like Gillica, this is a fight that can be over pretty much as soon as it starts, with just a little bit of aggression and a little bit of patience. The Sanguine Noble is one of Mohg's followers, able to cause bleed buildup with most of his attacks. But he's not very aggressive, preferring to stand back and wait for opportunities to strike. This makes it very easy to manage your bleed, and as long as you dodge out of his blood pools as he summons them, you don't have to worry. You can out DPS this fucker, and you can always wait for him to make the first move so he doesn't get the chance to parry you. Honestly, I've always found a disconnect with the Sanguine Noble enemies. They're meant to seem threatening, but anytime I actually fight them, I find them relatively easy. Maybe it's the fact they're player-sized, or the fact they look like baby Mohgs, I'm not sure, but I don't think I've ever felt threatened by them. This boss guards the Bloody Halike, the weapon of the Sanguine Noble, which from my research is a weapon more suited towards PvP over PvE. Not to say it's bad for the main game, far from it, bleed buildup is always a powerful tool, but there are other weapons like Morgoth's Cursed Sword that have the same effect but do more overall damage. The Sanguine Noble is fine, it's a new fight, but not particularly memorable in the long run. In fact, probably one of my most forgettable fights in the game. At number 15, we have the Knights Cavalry, found on the main road of Altus Plateau. Another flail user, this cavalry unit is just a tad stronger than the one we fought in Caelid, sitting at a solid 3,725 HP. It doesn't have any enemies to back it up, meaning it's just you, the boss, and the stars above. This is, in my opinion, the last of the meh cavalry fights, and as such it places this low on the list because it doesn't do enough to differentiate itself from those we've already ranked in prior episodes. It's no Forbidden Lands or Snowfield Knights Cavalry after all. If you haven't seen prior episodes of this series, what I love about the Knights Cavalries are how they play by the same rules as the player regarding their mounts. Like Torrent, you can kill their horses and get a solid critical hit for your troubles, so damaging them and their mounts so you can capitalize and ultimately win the fight is satisfying to pull off. It drops the Shared Order Ash of War upon defeat, which gives weapons the Sacred Affinity when applied, and grants the skill Shared Order, which acts as a 60-second aura buff for the player and anyone around them, allowing them to deal 50% more damage to undead enemies and 10% more damage in general. Useful stuff, and pretty cheap at 20 FP too. Thank you, Knights Cavalry, for continuing to provide. At number 14, we have the Ancient Hero of Zamor, found in the Sainted Hero's Grave. This is another fight that disappointed me. Not because of the battle itself, the Ancient Hero of Zamor is always a fun time, with a really well-designed boss battle that has 2 very distinct phases. No, the problem is that my first encounter with this boss was in the Everjail all the way on the Weeping Peninsula. There it felt important, meaningful, was a tough fight, and really exhilarated me. So seeing one in a hero's grave in Altus, of all places, is a bit random. Like, we have the ancient hero of Zamor in the hero's grave in the mountaintops later in the game, but that makes sense, it's the region where Zamor once stood. But here in Altus, it feels like there's no real reason for this enemy to actually be here. It doesn't help that in terms of HP, there's not a terribly large jump between the Evergaol variant at 2,570 and this fight at 3,811. I wanted a bit more of a difficulty jump to justify its existence. He drops the ancient Dragon Knight Kristoff Spirit Ashes upon defeat, which is an extremely solid summon when it comes to splitting aggro. This is because Kristoff hides behind a very large Great Shield, playing a defensive role in any of his fights. Plus, he's a fun throwaway character due to his lore, as he captured Godefroy the Grafted. Didn't think Godefroy had actual lore. We'll get to him later on. At number 13, we have the Black Knife Assassin found in the Sage's Cave. Personally, if I'm being completely subjective, I really don't like this fight in practice. In design, I think it's actually quite fun though. An invisible enemy that you can only spot via the movement of the water on the floor of the arena, it's a very promising concept, but results in most players getting stabbed from behind, stabbed from behind, stabbed from behind, stabbed from... You can purchase the Sentry's Torch from the Hermit Merchant behind the outer walls of Lanedell, which, when equipped, allows you to see invisible foes, which, let me tell you, later on in the snowfield in Ordina, so fucking useful. Here though, I twirled my Twin Blade and just got lucky that its DPS and high speed was enough to stagger and counter the Black Knife Assassin's approach. But I remember my original playthrough, and this fight there was hell for me. I couldn't do shit. I had to spirit summon just to know where the boss was. I was awful. Hell is here. And those bad memories just keep this assassin lower on the list, though they at least had the kindness to not let her use her red flame attacks. She drops the Concealing Veil talisman upon defeat, which conceals the wearer from enemies while crouching. Become the Metal Gear Solid character you wish to be. I haven't tested the mechanics of this talisman myself, but I bet it does have some cool niche uses. Let me know down below in the comments. At number 12, we have the Erdtree Burial Watchdog found in the Wyndham Catacombs. The last of the Watchdog fights in this series. I'm devastated, I truly am. This guy seeks to differentiate himself by imbuing his body with lightning. However, and this is perhaps my greatest sin while recording B-roll for this series, I managed to kill this watchdog without it using a single lightning attack. Guard countering was my strategy, and it paid off in spades, as I was able to break its posture twice throughout the fight to deliver the final coup de grace. But I have had past experience where its lightning was a problem due to the wet arena we found ourselves in, so underestimate the watchdog at your own peril, viewers. This may have been the one watchdog fight where I think having an enemy like some weak soldiers who throw lightning pots might have actually made it more interesting. Unlike his brethren, this watchdog drops the Glovewort Picker's Bell-Bearing 1 as opposed to a Spirit Ash, which gives access to Grave Glovewort 1, 2, and 3. Great for upgrading all those trash tier Spirit Ashes you got from all the other watchdog fights. At number 11, we have the Tibia Mariner found at the Wyndham Ruins. Easily the most memorable Mariner in the game, the Altus variant is special for two reasons. One, his arena is fucking huge, which makes him surprisingly tough to find when he warps away. Or maybe I'm just really bad at looking, as I ended up running away from the arena thinking he was on top of the Wyndham Ruins hill, only to see him all the way at the bottom in a corner of the lake. 2, this Tibia Mariner doesn't summon small skeletons to help him fight, nah. He summons gigantic skeleton spirits which can fire devastating beams of ghost flame at the player. Anytime they show up in the game, shit's about to go down, be it in the mountaintops at the graveyard, or how about the approach to Mohgwyn Palace, or right here with this Tibia Mariner. You can use parts of the ruins to hide from the giant skeletons, but their beams and their hand slams can break the walls, taking away your cover. Love breakable environments, really makes this fight feel frenetic and real. This boss also has almost 8,000 HP, so this becomes a marathon, not a sprint, as you aim to take down the Mariner before he turns it back on you. And unlike the Liurnia variant, he's actually found in a flooded ruin as befitting of his lore, hallelujah. Defeating him gets you the Tibia Summon sorcery, allowing you too to summon a trio of skeletons that attack a spot away from the player. It's not an easy sorcery to land, but looks so damn cool, and received a ton of buffs to try and make it more viable. If you want to go full Necromancer, take this Mariner down, and use his ability as your own. Wow man, those bosses on Altus Plateau are crazy, but you know what I want to do? I want to plateau my channel. We're trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I'm trying to reach 100,000 subscribers as a general goal for the channel. So if you want to help out, be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos, or consider going the extra mile if you really enjoy this, and check out my channel membership program. It is $4.99 a month. You get 24-hour early access to most of my videos, as well as a shout out in the description down here and at the end of every video as well. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening. Back to the video. At number 10, we have the Omen Killer and Miranda the Blighted Bloom. Another boss I missed on my first playthrough. They're hidden in the Perfumer's Grotto, and if the arena was a tad smaller, they would make a perfect tag team. Because the Omen Killer's fierce ferocity, matched with the Miranda Flower's ability to lay poison and utilize light magic, could have been a deadly combination. It doesn't quite work out that way though in practice, as you can bring the Omen Killer to the edges of the cavern so none of Miranda's attacks except the light magic can actually reach you, and that's easily avoided regardless. Still, I like the concept of these two individual bosses joining forces to maximize their joint slay, even if I was the one doing the slaying. Omen Killer is fun, but without his dogs, I actually had a good time parrying and countering his attacks. Once Miranda's left on her own though, she's a sitting duck. Beating up plants has never felt so sad. They drop the Great Omen Killer Cleaver upon defeat, the Blade of the Omen Killer. It's the only weapon of its class to do bleed buildup and doesn't have very high stat requirements, just 23 strength and 12 dex, which makes it viable for a ton of builds. Solid weapon, glad to have it, might have to use it at some point. You know, I actually like these random duo fights that throw shit at the wall by taking two fairly simple bosses and saying, "Have at you!" No complaints from me. At number 9, we have Necromancer Garrus, a hidden boss in the Sage's Cave. Now, when I announced my intent to rank every Elden Ring boss on Twitter, one of my followers, @BattleTankBob, explicitly replied to my post rooting for Garrus. And you know what? He is in my top 50% of Elden Ring fights. He's one of only a handful of truly hidden bosses in the game, not being the main boss of his dungeon, and he's surprisingly tough if you underestimate him. His flail attacks come out fast and stun you out of animations, but that's standard for flail users. His danger comes from his various death magics, such as summoning skeletal snails to roll into you, acting as some sort of demented bone wheel skeletons. These snails can be very irritating, as when you try to attack Garrus, they always show up to hit you, making them a perfect defense. He can also perform Rancor Call, a death magic spell that creates a series of homing skulls that will follow you to the ends of the earth and beyond. The snails can also use this spell too, by the way, and it lasts for way longer than should be wanted or needed, and took up over half the battle with me just trying to dodge these skulls. It's like a Tom and Jerry routine. Lastly, he can use the Tibia Summon sorcery, targeting you with necrotic skeleton spirits. Killing him drops his flail, Family Heads, which is made to resemble the heads of Garrus's wife and children. Certainly an interesting choice for a family photo. Garrus can be very irritating to fight with the wrong build, but I find the way his kit is designed, as well as his hidden encountered nature, to be enough to lift him high on this list. At number 8, we have Perfumer Trisha and the Misbegotten Warrior, found in the depths of the Unsightly Catacombs. Straight away, I just really want to appreciate Trisha's lore, a healer who dedicated her efforts to treating Misbegotten, Omen, and all those seen as impure. She made sure she was there for her companions when they died, allowing them to pass peacefully. So naturally, we rock up, kill the Misbegotten warrior that was likely a friend of hers, and then slaughter her for her spirit ashes. Crazy how we're meant to be the good guy, right? The Misbegotten warrior is fought like any Misbegotten we've faced up to this point, such as the one in Castle Redmane or the Leonine Misbegotten from Castle Morn. Big sword, avoid the swings, guard counter, keep the aggression, survive. Except Trisha loves to get in the way. She can throw perfume at you from off-screen, which acts like the explosive firecrackers in Sekiro, but her most dangerous skill is the ability to buff the Misbegotten warrior with her uplifting aromatic. The aromatic increases damage, and enemies gain a shield that protects them from the player's next attack. And if you go after Trisha herself, she's got a golden shield to block any incoming hits. So you have to focus her down, but you won't have much time away from the Misbegotten warrior to do this, so instead you have to kill the warrior, leaving Trisha defenseless. Defeating her, as I alluded to earlier, gets you the Perfumer Trisha Spirit Ashes. Yes, you just killed a woman and are now enslaving her spirit to fight with you. Now she can give you her buffs, which is incredibly useful, but also incredibly fucked up. At number 7, we have the Black Knife Assassin, found outside the Sainted Hero's grave, and the last of her kind that I have to rank for this series. She's easily the hardest of the regular Black Knife Assassins, second only to Electo in Liurnia, though they share the same moveset. This assassin has a solid 5,412 HP, and guards the hero's grave whenever you get in close. You have a wide area to fight in, meaning it's better to let her come to you instead of making up the distance yourself. Unless they use their ranged red flame attacks, the assassins always have to approach. You can also take Torrent into this fight, though whether that's a good idea or not is entirely up to your tastes. Personally, I'd rather fight on foot, but that's because Torrent would get wiped out by one of those assassins immediately if it were me playing. I just find these gals fun to fight. Their movesets are flighty and fast, but with a build like mine, I have to force them in close to do damage, and that's where I think they're at their weakest. This woman drops the Black Knife, which is considered an absolute beast when it comes to its Ash of War. Remember Black Knife Tish, and why she's arguably the most powerful summon in the game? Well, now imagine that you can use her Destined Death skill as an opener to any boss fight for easy damage. Need I say more? At number 6, we have Godefroy the Grafted, found in the Royal Lineage Everjail. I'm not even going to attempt to figure out the lore reason why we have a twin of Godric chilling in an Everjail at Altus. All we know is that he was defeated by Ancient Dragon Knight Kristoff, and that's all I care to see. Let's call this what it is. A shameless way to reuse a pre-existing demigod boss fight without the effort of implementing a boss rematch system. Taking away that Godefroy is just a full fight of Phase 1 Godric, how is he to play against? Well, it's the same fight as before, just with a more level arena and no risk of falling off the sides to your doom. Godric Phase 1 is still fantastic and holds up with Godefroy. In fact, with Godefroy's upgraded stats and health pool, he's actually a surprisingly hard fight. Killed me once, which took me by complete surprise, but you know what? I respect the hustle. Godefroy may be one of the laziest bosses in the entire game, but since he's still based on an amazing fight, he's still technically an enjoyable experience. He drops the Godfrey icon upon his defeat, which is a talisman that raises the attack power of charged spells and skills by 15%. AKA, it is a requirement if you want to create some of the most busted magic builds the Lands Between has ever seen. Godefroy, you make me laugh every time I remember you, but then you make me groan with pain when you kill me all the same. I have to, begrudgingly, respect it. At number 5, we have the Tree Sentinel duo who guard the entrance to the capital outskirts. This pair represent the cutoff point for Altus Plateau, and also represent how far the player has come since Limgrave, as now the game feels we can handle a pair of Tree Sentinels. The reality though is that most players will ride past them with Torrent, collect the nearby Site of Grace, and then begin to aggro each Tree Sentinel one at a time, turning the fight from a 2v1 to 2 1v1s, and that is also what I did, no shame. I love the Tree Sentinels, don't get me wrong, but 2-on-1 just sounds like a recipe for disaster. Unless you've got OP magic that can blast one of them to Kingdom Come early, it's best to take this fight slow, as even if you kill one of the pair, if you die to the other, they both respawn. One wields the shield, the other a sentry torch in their offhand, and I would recommend taking on the latter first. No way to shield from magic, less HP, it just makes sense. Then go after the Great Shield variant second, since it's what you'd be used to from Limgrave. And once again, Torrent is fully viable for this fight in case you want to joust with a Tree Sentinel. It's a strategy that can work with someone who knows the ins and outs of Torrent's control scheme. They drop a Hero's Rune 1 upon defeat, which gives 15,000 runes upon use, as well as the Erdtree Great Shield, allowing you two to use their skill, Golden Retaliation, to blast back any sorceries or incantations sent your way. Plus it's just a cool-ass shield, looks great. Sometimes the game is very blatant in the way it reuses content, but I think the concept of 2 Tree Sentinels you can fight being a direct parallel to the start of the game, while still giving you the option to skip their asses if you really want to, I just think it's fun. Might try fighting them both together on my next run. At number 4, we have the Falling Star Beast, found to the south of the stairway where you fight the dual Tree Sentinels. Another boss that I didn't find on my first playthrough, but one I'm glad I discovered this time around. This was the first Falling Star Beast I fought in the run, and it handed me my ass. But only once. One death. Because that's all I was willing to let it take. This Falling Star Beast is aggressive and dangerous, with tail swipes and gravity magic galore, while being far tankier than the one found in Celia Crystal Tunnel in Caelid. It's way more on par with its fully grown counterpart on Mount Gelmir. Why it lands so high is the energy this fight gave me. The Falling Star Beast is incredibly capable of killing Tarnished, and has such a wide moveset to begin with that having to learn its tells, taking hits, and dropping down to low healing flask numbers was exciting. It's a real shame then that it has no unique drops whatsoever. A single Somber Smithing Stone 5, some normal Smithing Stone 6s, and a bunch of gravity fans. Without any real reward for my efforts, this boss can't really make it into my top 3. But I've gushed about this boss enough in the Mount Gelmir and Caelid videos that I think you get the picture. And if you haven't seen those videos, what are you waiting for? Check them out when you're done here, down below, description, come on. At number 3, we have Ancient Dragon Lanciax, found near the alternate entrance to Altus Plateau as a surprise ambush. You can choose to flee her here, or fight her to deal some damage, but she'll eventually retreat after she reaches 80% health. From there, you have to explore the area to the southeast of the Altus' hero's grave to have Lanciax show up for round 2. Though technically she always shows up here anyway, it's just if you encounter her the first time, the damage you did will then carry over to this appearance, which I really love. Lanciax is the boss form of the Crumbling Faramazula dragons, and with that comes the usual dragon moveset, but enhanced with their signature red lightning. While it's fully possible to use Torrent during this fight, I actually think for this style of dragon, it's best to leave him at home. Lanciax has far more dangerous AoEs that can two-shot the poor horse, so unless you're using him to make distance, I wouldn't even bother. She has multiple deadly attacks, like sliding her electrified claws across the ground, a swipe that always got me. Or how about Lanciax's glaive, a giant crackle of thunder that she sweeps across the ground, creating an AoE. She stays out of the sky more often than the usual Dragonfield bosses, which is refreshing, because it gives you way more chances to hit her. But she makes up for that with an insane damage output that will likely have you slain more than once. There's nothing funnier than watching people run into Ancient Dragon Lanciax without expecting it, and it'll never get old. Though I do think her overall arena has a lot of uneven terrain that both the boss and the player can get stuck on. Look at the mess going on in the footage near the ruin here, and tell me this was intentional. She drops 60,000 runes and Lanciax's glaive upon her defeat, her signature incantation, which is a brilliant spell for crowd control due to the large sweep of the glaive and the distance of the follow-up AoE lightning strikes. You can't go wrong with this in your back pocket. Lanciax is likely many players' favourite fight from the Altus Plateau, but subjectively, I just prefer humanoid fights, hence my preference for my top 2, who we've already technically seen throughout this series. Am I getting predictable? I think I am. At number 2, we have Elmer of the Briar, found in the Shaded Castle in North Altus. We have talked about the Bell-Bearing Hunter ad nauseum throughout this series, but now we finally get to talk about the real man behind the legend, Elmer. Hi. Entering this boss arena for the first time was mind-blowing. I wasn't expecting to ever meet the Bell-Bearing Hunter, much less fight him in person. It took me a few moments to figure out who he was, but once the Force came out, oh my god. In this encounter, he's difficult not because of his health, which sits at around 4,897 HP, but his arena, which is a very small and enclosed space where no matter your positioning, you cannot escape his blade. So you have to take the Bloodborne approach and play as aggressively as you can, getting in heals between attacks as opposed to making distance. This can be tough, what with the tables in the room when you first enter, which you have to break as you fight, and trying to bait specific force attacks to get the result you want where you can heal for a moment can be rough. But his design, his music, and the sheer coolness of his weapon have me enthralled. I'd love for some more Earcade bullshit in the DLC, but I find it highly unlikely. Defeating him grants you the Mirai Executioner's Sword and the Briar Great Shield, the 2 signature weapons of the Bell-Bearing Hunter, Elmer of the Briar, allowing you to begin the journey to cosplaying this man yourself. Switch out the Great Shield's skill for Shield Crash, and you have a skill that can even body Malenia, at least according to a single Reddit user, take that with a grain of salt. Elmer, you're awesome and feel so disconnected to the rest of Elden Ring, but in a good way. A nice optional appetizer before hopping back onto the story's main course. And number 1, we have the Godskin Apostle, found in Dominilla Windmill Village. It's a repeat of Dragon Barrow. I am insanely biased towards the Apostles, and I have no problem giving this guy another number 1 spot. This specific Godskin Apostle is designed to be the first you encounter in the game, the easier of the 2 with 7,528 HP. Just that first journey up the Windmill Village, past the dancing women who have flayed the men of their town alive, full Midsummer feelings, until you reach the peak and this long man strides around the corner. It's one of the most perfect build-ups for one of the most fun twin blade movesets I've had the pleasure of fighting. I go into his combat more in the Dragon Barrow video, so I won't repeat myself too much here, but what I will say is that his stretchiness and his ability to control the arena is undoubtedly his strongest asset. Combined with one of the best OSTs in Soulsborne history, which has remained stuck in my head for the past 2 years, and you have a fight that is very hard to forget. He's just hard enough to be a challenge, while easy enough that you don't think you've got no shot, and he's so worth defeating. He drops the Scouring Black Flame incantation if that's your fancy, but for me, he dropped my baby, the Godskin Peeler, which I had determined back when I first picked up my Twin Blade would be my chosen weapon for the second half of Elden Ring. It served me well, and its skill, Black Flame Tornado, actually helped me to deliver the final blow to Malenia, Goddess of Rot. This Twin Blade is worth its weight in gold, though I know some people are horrified to find I never upgraded it with different affinities. I just keep forgetting that's a thing, I'm so sorry, I am a casual player. Honestly, I see a bit of myself in the Godskin Apostle. We're both thin, we're both white, we're both able to stretch our bodies long distance, although in my case it's through the power of the internet, while in his case it's literally breaking all of his bones. Kinda goals though. And that's my list. Which Altus Plateau boss is your favourite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord, but the Twitter is the best place to go. A massive shout out to all my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. And I'll see you guys next time in another video. Adios!